Tom Harroway smells diesel before he sees anything. He opens a narrow vent in the lantern room so the glass will not sweat, and storm air pushes in. Salt, wet rope, kelp, and then a sharp oily note that does not belong this close to shore. The result is a warning he can feel in the back of his throat. The cost is that once he notices it, he cannot pretend the night is ordinary. He braces his binoculars against the window frame and scans the reef line. Most nights, before the war, the coast had little markers, porch lamps, a dock light, a town glow low on the horizon. Now the coastline is trained to stay dark. Blackout orders have been posted in every fishing village, and Tom has learned to keep the lighthouse from becoming a beacon for the wrong ship. When the Coast Guard tells him to shade the lamp or reduce the beam, he does it. The result is a safer coastline in theory. The cost is that on nights like this, he has less light to see danger. Lightning finally gives him the answer. A long hull is pinned to the reef, tilted hard, with a low conning tower rising from the middle. In the brief white flash, he sees the curve of the bow, the rail, and men on the slanted deck moving in short, panicked motions. One clings to the tower ladder. Another slides and disappears as a wave hits. The result is a clear enemy shape, a submarine stuck fast. The cost is immediate duty, because Tom is the only witness close enough to report it in real time. Tom is still called a lighthouse keeper, but the station is not run like an old civilian post anymore. Since the lighthouse service was folded into the Coast Guard, his work has come with wartime rules: locked doors, sealed windows, strict radio discipline, and a log written as if it will be read later by someone who was not here in the wind. He checks the clock, the barometer, and the wind direction, then writes them down with a pencil that smears because the air is never truly dry. The result is a clean timeline. The cost is that the same timeline can later be used to judge him. He goes to the radio table and calls the nearest Coast Guard sector. Static fights him, but he pushes through the format he has been taught: station identification, bearing, distance, nature of contact, enemy submarine grounded on rocks, possible crew in the water, possible attempt to reach shore. He repeats the coordinates twice because storms eat words. The result is that the warning goes out. The cost is that he cannot be sure which syllables arrive intact on the other end. The reply comes back short and firm. They have his report. The weather is delaying a boat. He must keep watch, keep logging, and not leave his post unless station safety requires it. The result is an order that sounds reasonable on paper. The cost is that paper cannot walk the beach, and the sea does not care about procedure. Tom returns to the lantern room and watches for hours. In the flashes, the submarine sits lower each tide, as if the sea is slowly filling it from the inside. Once, something slams against the rocks below. Timber, metal, or a body. And Tom flinches, but keeps his eyes on the reef because the order is to watch the threat. The result is continued observation. The cost is the feeling that he is counting deaths while waiting for help. He forces himself to keep writing. Quarter-hour marks, wind, visibility, contact status unchanged. The generator hums below him like a distant engine. The tower smells of damp wool, hot metal, and machine oil. A framed photograph of his son in uniform hangs by the radio shelf, the smile frozen from before the war took him. Tom does not touch the frame. He keeps the pencil moving, because grief and fear both get worse when he stops. The result is discipline. The cost is that discipline turns him into a witness instead of a man. Just before dawn, the storm shifts. The wind drops enough for him to see more than flashes, and the submarine's deck goes empty. Either the men have been washed away, or they have gone over the side on purpose. Tom cannot tell, and that ignorance gnaws harder than any certainty. The result is a new problem, not only a wreck, but possible survivors moving in the dark. The cost is that he is still alone. When the sky finally lightens, Tom straps on oilskins, takes the station rifle, and packs the first aid kit. Bandages, iodine, sulfur powder, and a few tablets that are more habit than medicine. He hesitates at the radio, then writes one line in the log instead. Leaving the tower to assess shoreline conditions. The result is a timestamp that proves he did not sneak off. The cost is that it also proves he chose to act against the safest interpretation of the order. The beach is a mess of shingle, kelp and wreckage. Tom finds bodies wedged in rocks and along the high water line, faces turned into stone. He checks one for breath out of reflex and finds none. He checks another and finds the same. The result is confirmation that the night killed men fast. The cost is the awareness that if any are alive, they will not stay alive long. Then he notices drag marks and footprints that look too steady to be made by waves. The marks angle away from the water toward a line of boulders, like someone pulled weight inland while the storm covered the sound. Tom follows the marks with his rifle held low, finger off the trigger, because the war has taught him that fear makes hands do stupid things. The result is evidence that someone moved here on purpose. The cost is the realization that Tom is already behind whatever plan came with the wreck. Behind a boulder, he finds the survivor, a young German sailor curled tight, lips blue, hands locked to his sleeves. Tom checks the neck and feels a faint pulse. The boy's eyes open a crack, then roll back, and his breathing catches as if every rib is a broken hinge. Tom sees blood at the edge of a torn sleeve and the pale skin of shock. The result is a living enemy in his hands. The cost is a choice that no rulebook makes easy. Tom thinks first of security, then of anger, because his own son died in the coastal war months earlier, torpedoed in sight of a shore that was still lit too brightly. For a second, the simplest thing in the world seems to be to step back and let the sea finish its work. Then the boy coughs, a thin, wet sound, and Tom sees how young he is, barely older than the boys who used to help with nets in summer. The result is hesitation. The cost is heat slipping out of the boy's body with every second. Tom slides his arms under the shoulders and drags him up the shingle. The boy is dead weight and soaked wool, and Tom slips once and bangs the boy's shoulder against rock. He stops, checks the pulse again, and forces himself to keep moving. The result is a rescue made by muscle, not permission. The cost is the risk of worsening injuries, and the risk of being judged as a man who sheltered the enemy. Inside the tower, Tom builds the stove hot and wraps the boy in blankets. He warms water and drips it between cracked lips. He keeps the boy's head turned so he does not choke on his own cough. He cleans a cut with iodine, dusts it with sulfur, and binds the ribs as gently as he can, knowing he is guessing at what is broken inside. The result is a fragile stabilization. The cost is that cold turns into fever, and Tom realizes he has invited a longer fight into a small room. The boy startles awake in panic and tries to sit up. Tom shows open hands, keeps his voice low and points to the stove, then to the blankets, then to the boy's chest as if saying, "Breathe." The boy's eyes lock on the rifle for a moment, then on Tom's face, and the struggle drains into exhausted staring. The result is a fragile truce built without language. The cost is that truce depends on Tom staying calm, while everything around him pushes toward panic. Before noon, Tom returns to the beach to see what else the sea delivered. He tells himself this is duty, evidence, safety, prevention, and also knows he is checking for other survivors because part of him still wants the Coast Guard to arrive and take the choices away. Above the wash line, he finds an oilcloth-wrapped bundle, stitched and tarred, heavy enough to feel deliberate. The storm did not tie knots like that. The result is a second problem that does not belong to weather. The cost is that leaving it there would mean losing it to whoever comes next. He carries the bundle back and opens it on the work table, because not opening it could mean letting explosives sit in his tower. Inside is a reinforced case with sealed metal tubes, small timer-like parts, and a treated envelope holding a typed sheet of dates and coastal place names. Tom reads just enough to recognize a rail junction inland and a small harbor he has used when supply runs were late. The result is a new truth. This is not only a wreck, it is a delivery. The cost is that Tom has now touched evidence that will pull the war straight into his lighthouse. He closes the case and hides it under the storage room floorboards. Then he looks at the radio and the boy by the stove and understands what he has become. A lone keeper, holding both a prisoner and a sabotage package, while the sea decides when the Coast Guard can arrive. The result is a trap he cannot step out of. The cost is that every minute he waits, the consequences grow. If you want more World War II stories told in a clear, grounded way, please hit like and follow. The result is that you won't miss the next account. The cost is a single click. When Tom checks the boy again, the fever has climbed higher, the skin is slick, the eyes glassy, and the breathing is shallower, as if the bruised ribs have tightened into a clamp. Tom presses a damp cloth to the forehead and watches the boy wince without fully waking. The result is a patient turning critical. The cost is that Tom cannot treat fever the way he treats a lamp, with tools and certainty. He makes broth from rationed canned meat and stale crackers and feeds the boy small spoonfuls. He keeps the boy on his side and wipes foam from the corner of the mouth when the cough returns. He listens for a wet rattle that would mean pneumonia, and every time the boy breathes cleanly for a minute, Tom feels hope rise and then hates himself for hoping. The result is care continuing beyond the first rescue. The cost is that care binds Tom tighter to the boy's survival. The boy murmurs in German, then tries broken English. Tom catches mutter and bitte, and then a phrase spoken with urgency that he cannot translate. The boy's hand drifts toward his own clothing, as if searching for something that is no longer there. Tom checks the seams and finds nothing but damp fabric and sand. The result is communication without clarity. The cost is suspicion, because Tom cannot tell whether the boy is asking for family or for a tool. Along this coast, suspicion has teeth. Only weeks ago, word spread that German saboteurs had come ashore, buried crates in dunes, and tried to bribe a Coast Guard patrolman into silence. The story spread faster than official notices and made every keeper and watchstander treat the beach like a crime scene. Tom remembers the way townspeople talked about it at the last supply drop. The fear, the anger, the certainty that an isolated man could be bought. The result is a pattern Tom recognizes. The cost is that his hidden case feels less like wreckage and more like an active threat under his feet. The radio is 2 steps away. Tom could report the case and cleanse himself in one call, but the Coast Guard would immediately ask why he went to the beach and why an enemy sailor is warming himself in the station. Answering any one question leads to the next, and the next can lead to an arrest if the wrong officer decides mercy looks like collaboration. The result is paralysis disguised as caution. The cost is time, and time is what fever consumes. He climbs to the lantern room to check the reef again, partly to follow orders and partly to keep from staring at the boy's sweating face. The submarine is sinking into the rocks, deck empty, hull lower each tide. The wind has shifted enough that Tom can smell the wreck, hot metal, oil, and wet paint. The result is confirmation that the boat is dying. The cost is that the dying boat leaves behind a living problem on Tom's floor. Back downstairs, Tom hears the boy's breathing change, faster, strained, then a long pause. Tom leans close, counts seconds, and feels his own pulse in his ears. When the boy finally draws air again, Tom realizes the rescue was only the first decision, not the last. The result is a new urgency. The cost is that Tom is out of his depth, practicing medicine with a kit meant for cuts and burns. Mid-afternoon brings a sound that freezes him, a small engine throttled low, approaching the landing. It is not the deeper thrum of a Coast Guard craft. Tom moves fast. He wedges the boy into the storage room, behind supplies, adds blankets, and closes the door, hating the cold he is forcing on the boy but fearing a stranger's eyes more. The result is concealment. The cost is the risk that cold will undo his earlier work and kill the boy anyway. He drags the oilcloth case out from under the boards and sets it under a tarp in the same storage room, thinking that if the Coast Guard arrives, he can reveal it. If a stranger arrives, he can deny it exists. The result is a plan made in seconds. The cost is that every plan he makes now is shaped by fear rather than clean duty. The knock is heavy and confident. Tom opens the door only far enough to speak. A man in wet oilskins claims he is checking stations after the storm and asks, too casually, whether anything washed up. His eyes inventory the room behind Tom with quick, trained flicks, stopping on the radio, the stove, the table, and then back to Tom's face. The result is a smooth cover story. The cost is the sense that this visit was planned before the storm even ended. Tom says the Coast Guard has been notified and that the station is secure. The visitor's gaze drops to Tom's boots, still damp with sand, then rises again. He offers help clearing debris and, in the same breath, suggests certain items could be handled privately, the way a man suggests a shortcut when he assumes you want one. The result is a probe. The cost is leverage because the visitor has noticed Tom's footprints without being told. The man produces folded bills, too crisp for a fisherman's pocket, and says Tom can forget any packages or papers. He even names oilcloth, as if it is normal trade. The result is a bribe with specificity. The cost is proof that the case is part of a coordinated drop, not random wreckage, and that someone expects to retrieve it. Tom keeps his answer simple. Nothing here is for sale, and the next person to ask will be reported. The visitor's expression settles, not shocked, as if he expected resistance. His eyes flick once toward the storage room door, then he steps back and says he will return with authorization. The result is retreat. The cost is a promise to come back, which turns the coming night into a countdown. When the skiff engine fades, Tom nearly grabs the radio. He stops again, because any report now includes a confession about the boy and about his own movement off-post. He stands with the handset inches from his fingers and forces himself to let it sit. The result is another delay. The cost is that each delay makes the eventual truth look worse, even if the delay was made to keep someone alive. He pulls up the floorboard, checks the empty space where the case was, then writes another entry in the log. Unknown skiff approached, attempted bribe, mentioned oilcloth, departed east. Tom writes it as if he is already in a hearing room. The result is a paper shield. The cost is that the shield will only help if his story never changes. The boy coughs in the storage room, deep and wet. Tom brings him back to the stove because he cannot afford to lose him before the Coast Guard arrives. A dead enemy in his tower would look like guilt, not mercy. The boy's gaze catches on the photo of Tom's son. He points and forms an English word with effort. Soldier. Then, with trembling hands, he produces a tiny waterproof frame from an inside seam Tom did not search. Inside are a woman and a younger girl, faces formal and strained, as if they were told to look brave. The result is mirrored proof that the war has families on both sides. The cost is that hate loses its clean edges at the moment Tom most needs certainty. Tom does not offer comfort because comfort would require language they do not share. He only keeps the stove going, keeps the boy drinking, and keeps his eyes on the clock. Outside, the sea quiets into long, heavy swells, as if the storm is taking a breath. Then the first steady horn sounds across the water, heavier than any skiff. The result is rescue at last. The cost is that rescue comes with questions and with consequences he can no longer manage alone. Tom leaves the boy in full view by the stove. Hiding him now would mean being caught hiding him, and Tom has learned that the coast punishes lies harder than it punishes ugly truths. He sets the boy's small frame on the shelf by his son's photo, not as a gesture, but because his hands need something to do. The result is a decision to face the truth. The cost is losing control over how that truth will be judged. He places the oilcloth case on the table, opens the log to the previous night's entries, and makes sure the times are legible. Then he waits with the door unlatched, because making them knock again would look like he was buying time. The result is preparation for scrutiny. The cost is surrender of privacy, because this room is about to become an evidence scene. The knock is firm and professional. Tom opens the door and faces 3 Coast Guardsmen, 1 officer, 2 enlisted, wet with spray and sharp with purpose. The officer introduces himself as Frank Mallory. His eyes take in the boy and the case in one sweep, then return to Tom's face, measuring. The result is authority inside the tower. The cost is judgment, because Mallory's first duty is not to Tom's feelings, but to the coast's safety. Mallory asks what Tom saw and whether there are survivors. Tom answers with one sentence and a gesture. One survivor, badly injured, needs a medic. The medic drops to a knee and begins working, checking pulse, checking temperature, and tightening blankets. The enlisted man with the carbine holds position, muzzle low. The result is care under custody. The cost is that the boy's fear spikes the moment uniforms fill the room, and his breathing turns sharp again. The medic asks the boy's name. The boy blinks, swallows, and says something that sounds like Conrad. Then fades back, eyes half shut. The result is a human detail that makes him harder to think of as an object. The cost is that naming also fixes him into a file as a prisoner, which means his life will now belong to procedure. Mallory asks what else Tom found. Tom points to the case and says it washed ashore, and he opened it for safety. When Mallory sees the tubes and timer parts, his focus shifts from rescue to containment. He pockets the envelope quickly, as if even reading it aloud could do harm. The result is a change in priority. The cost is that Tom's fingerprints are now part of the evidence, whether he meant them to be or not. Mallory's questions come in a chain meant to lock time to action. When Tom left the tower, when he found the boy, when he found the bundle, when he opened it, whether anyone else approached the station. Tom answers by reading the log entries aloud, letting the book speak for him. The result is a solid timeline. The cost is that every minute he delayed becomes visible as a decision. And Mallory's silence makes Tom feel each minute like a weight. When Tom reaches the line about the skiff and the bribe attempt, Mallory's expression changes. Less surprise, more confirmation. He asks for description, approach, words used. Tom gives what he can without embellishment. Wet oilskins, ordinary face, crisp bills, the word oilcloth, the promise to return with authorization. The result is actionable intelligence. The cost is that Tom's choices now shape an investigation, and mistakes will be measured against his own writing. Mallory orders one enlisted man to watch the landing for the skiff's return. The other secures the case and tags the items, marking each component and sealing the envelope. The medic prepares Conrad for transport as a prisoner of war, because that label forces a standard of treatment and a clear chain of custody. The result is procedure and protection. The cost is that Conrad is no longer Tom's responsibility, only Tom's consequence. They do not leave at once. They wait, because the visitor said he would return. Tom sits by the stove and listens to the enlisted man's boots shift on the tower stairs below. Every sound outside the door makes Tom tense. A gull, a wave, the scrape of stone. The result is a tense stillness. The cost is that Tom understands how close the war has come, and how easily a lighthouse can become a meeting point for men who should never meet. The skiff returns before midnight. Tom hears the engine first, then sees the faint movement at the landing through the window. Coast Guardsmen move into position below, silhouettes against wet rock. A shouted command cuts through the wind, followed by a brief scramble, and then the controlled quiet that means someone has been stopped. The result is an arrest built from Tom's report. The cost is the knowledge that the coast was compromised close enough to knock on his door, and that if Tom had taken the money, no one would have been waiting. They bring the man inside, soaked and furious, hands bound. The enlisted men search him on the table while Mallory watches the door and the window. They find a folded map segment, a small compass, and a waxed paper list of inland addresses. One name matches the typed sheet from the oilcloth case. The result is evidence of a network. The cost is that Tom sees how close the shore came to something worse, and how easily a single bribe could have moved danger inland. Mallory tells Tom the man will be turned over to federal authorities. He does not say the initials, but Tom understands who gets involved when sabotage is suspected. The result is escalation beyond the coast. The cost is that Tom's quiet station will now exist in reports and interviews, not just in weather logs. Near dawn, the Coast Guard boat prepares to depart. Conrad is carried out first, wrapped and strapped to a stretcher, and loaded carefully because the medic suspects cracked ribs. Conrad turns his head once toward Tom, eyes full of a question Tom cannot answer. The result is separation. The cost is unresolved debt because Tom will never know if the boy lives long enough to go home. The case and papers go next. Mallory notes that Tom's log will be retained as part of the report. Tom lets it go because keeping it would look like keeping a secret. The result is compliance. The cost is that Tom's story will live in other hands, filed and summarized by people who are not here in the wind. Before leaving, Mallory asks why Tom did not hide the boy. Tom answers plainly. The boy would have died on the beach, and Tom believed the Coast Guard would follow the law with a prisoner. Mallory nods once and warns Tom not to share details on the mainland. The result is conditional acceptance. The cost is enforced silence. After the boat fades into the morning, the tower returns to its old sounds, but the room feels altered by absence. Tom starts a fresh notebook and writes the day's header, because the station's records must continue even when the originals are taken. The result is continuity. The cost is pretending the tower is only a tower. Weeks later, while stacking supplies, Tom finds the tiny waterproof frame wedged beneath a crate, missed in the rush. He sets it beside his son's photograph and does not explain it to anyone because there is no explanation that will satisfy the war. The result is an object placed. The cost is a quiet question that will not leave. That evening, he fills the last line of the day's new log. Weather fair. Visibility good. No new contacts. He ends with the old phrase, all normal. The result is a completed record. The cost is that normal is now a thinner word than it was before the coast went dark.